Chapter 5. At least at first, the DoD Chinese school was considerably less rigorous than what I had gone through in college. On the other hand, it was 6 hours a day of instruction, with an instructor in the morning and a different instructor in the afternoon. The morning instructor was a severe Chinese woman academic. She introduced herself as Li Xiaojie, or Miss Li. I thought this odd since I understood that only young, unmarried women were Miss. And Miss Li was one of those Chinese women of a certain age who could be anywhere from 40 to 80. There were no lines on her face. Maybe 2 strands of gray hair in a bob that ended just below her jawline. She had cat's eye glasses on what looked like a identification tag chain. I knew I had blown a pronunciation or chosen the wrong vocabulary word or constructed some kind of pidgin Chinese sentence when she would take her glasses off, let them drop to her chest, and exclaim, "Ding Shenxiang!" or Mr. Ding to you Occidentals. Oh, on the first day of class, she told me to select a Chinese name she could call me during the course. Having been through 4 years of Mandarin in college, I was ready for her. 我姓丁. 我的名字是丁一. My family name is Ding. My whole name is Ding Yi. This was the first instance when her glasses fell off her face. Her expression looked like she had just noticed I had stepped in something before class and brought it in. In perfectly unaccented English, she said, "That is a very low-status name for someone who is supposedly going to attend graduate school." 我知道，可是非常容易的翻译的. I know, but it is the easiest name for me to write. Which is true. Ding looks like a capital J, and Yi is a dash. I could spell my whole name in Chinese, making 3 marks on the paper. She objected because in China, peasants name their sons by their birth order. The name I chose meant I was supposedly Farmer Ding's firstborn. The expression on her face told me that the smell was getting worse. But from then on, I was Mr. Ding. I asked her if she wanted to call me Captain Ding, but she told me that was not permitted, so I never pushed it. My afternoon instructor was a young, apparently recent graduate from college who called himself Tony Dow. I asked if he picked that name himself, and he said he had. I kept to myself the observation that he had the same name as the actor who played the Beeves' brother on the old TV show. Why antagonize or confuse the guy on his first day? He was an excellent teacher once we passed the painful few weeks of review and launched into conversational Mandarin. Tony Dow looked like any other graduate assistant, wearing broadcloth shirts with ties and a tweed jacket. His English was excellent, but he had a slight accent that sounded like he was educated in English schools in Hong Kong, even though Tony mentioned being born in the U.S. I never pushed for any further explanation, although a briefing I read in the skiff during one of the interminable watches I had to stand in Kuwait made the point that the PRC, or China, as most people say, had infiltrated a lot of students and instructors onto college campuses. This highly classified CIA yellow paper said a lot of stuff. Why was it called a yellow paper? I did not want to think too hard about it. But this yellow paper made the point that intelligence personnel should assume any Chinese academic they met was an agent of the PRC and act accordingly. I didn't know what a language student was supposed to guard against, although the little Chinese language dialogues we worked through were quite personal. I made up facts about myself, and Tony did not seem to notice or care about the inconsistencies. I told Tony I had been born in 3 different states. I was married, divorced, and widowed, and my wife, or wives technically, you would say to remain numerate, were named for flowers. Hyacinth died to make me a widower. Flavia ran off with the ice cream vendor, and Iris waited patiently for me in Garden City. And I was in all the service branches, although Miss Lee did not believe there was something called Space Force. Tony did not comment much on the various revelations except that my accent, when I spoke Mandarin, sounded like someone on newscasts out of Beijing rather than Ding Yi, the sewer worker. A TV personality, huh? If this grad school thing didn't work out, I could get one of those gigs as the Western guy on those game shows who makes observation in fractured Mandarin to the howls of delight of the laugh track. The school, generically named Educational Services LLC, was one half of the 6th floor of an office building that rose out of a shopping mall and a parking garage. I was quite grateful for the parking garage since I had bought myself a used Corolla and got validated parking every day. I would arrive at 0900 daily, check in with the receptionist, who sent the attendance reports back to Lieutenant Commander de Grossier, and start class. I would break for lunch, eating what I brought in the break room, and Miss Lee would disappear. I would return to my classroom at 1300, 1 p.m. to you and me, and Tony would take over. I occasionally saw other students, but the books I saw in their hands looked like Arabic or Cyrillic. There was not much socializing, which was fine with me. I wanted to cram in all the Mandarin I could and get back to Janice. Sitting around talking to other language drones would take away study time. But when I stopped to think about it, which was not too often, I had difficulty working up any enthusiasm to see Janice. Our phone conversations, when I could get her to answer, were perfunctory and not particularly exciting. Why, I was starting to get the impression that she was not too enthusiastic about this new chapter in our life. She would allude to a talent agent working on getting her modeling gigs and how excited she was to see where that might lead her. I mean, Janice was an attractive woman, near cheerleader material in Houston. Still, Southern California crawls with legitimately stunning women, most of whom are not employed as models or actresses. You know this by seeing gorgeous waitresses and bartenders everywhere you go. A nagging voice in my mind told me that this talent scout was more interested in some of Janice's talents than others. But how to broach that? And did I want to? The honest answer was no. Language school ended up being all day in the classroom, home for a run through the sketchy neighborhood where I found a cheap apartment since Marine officers, even ones spending all their time in classrooms, still must be able to run 3 miles in respectable time. I would eat something frozen that I would heat in the microwave, drink a beer, and study until I could not keep my eyes open anymore. Then the next day I would start all that over again. Not much of note happened that first month, except for one anecdote that proved later to be of interest to Fitz. Well, not Fitz, but some psychologists who worked for him. Not that I want to get too far ahead. There will be much more about Fitz and his psychologists later. Tony told me he had been reading about language learning techniques involving hypnotism. Since I was having trouble with the future tense, he wanted to try the hypnotism gag on me to see if it would make a difference. What the hey? Give it a shot, Tony. The next day he asked me to sit behind his laptop since he had loaded the hypnotism app. He turned on the lights like we were going to a seance circa 1936, and I looked at a picture on the app. He gave me one of those heart rate monitors to put on your finger like they do at the Doc in the Box office. It's connected to the app via Bluetooth. Whatever you say, Tony. He told me to keep my eyes on the picture and try to identify the music. The initial image on the screen was an apple on a table with bookcases full of books in the background. A harpsichord was playing faintly, almost below the audible level. The music sounded like an instrumental version of Smells Like Teen Spirit, which I thought could not be correct. And meanwhile, the apple was changing color. The bookshelves changed to holding CDs, then vinyl albums, and what I thought were containers of spices. It was all interesting and, I dare say, mesmerizing. At some point, probably when the finger gauge said I was primed, Tony began asking questions in English that did not have much to do with Mandarin language training. What was your last unit? Where are you living now? What is your name? I murmured a couple of gibberish syllables to the first two, but I answered distinctly on the last one. Puddentane, ask me again and I will tell you the same. The pics and the music were pleasant and all, but I never felt like I was disassociating or separating or whatever the term the psych types use to mean not in control. Tony looked shocked, so I pulled off the finger gizmo and said, Fun time is over, Tony. Whatever you thought this would do didn't take, so let's just get back to Dr. Mong describing the surgery. The shrinks at the ranch quizzed me closely about the app, and I told them what I could remember. But again, I'm getting too far ahead. We returned to the surgeries Dr. Mong in the Shanghai hospital would be performing. The text seemed almost weirdly focused on describing various maladies that had happened or will happen, but I went along. Cooperate and graduate, as my mother said. I had to admit that it is handy to describe illnesses and injuries in a foreign language, a skill I would find useful in the months and years to come. Tony never again mentioned the hypnosis failure, but he did seem quite a bit less, how to put it, invested in my progress. He punched the clock, corrected my pronunciation, and gave me grammar tips, but he could have been more forthcoming. I was a failure for whatever he was supposed to do, but that was okay. I was moving on.